Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're going to get another Hunter the Parenting fix by analysis of Kevin by QosmicVoid. He did an analysis of Big D, and frankly, he brought receipts for all of his different points to show just how his characterization, his mentality worked, which I love because I have a master's in fiction. I love breaking down character motivations by point, by point, by point, and obsessing over things that are incredibly geeky that I enjoy because, again, yeah, me, geeky, who'd have thought. More importantly, we get to do it with Kevin now. I am very much looking forward to this. You guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. QosmicVoid made a great video last time. I'm going to take a wild guess, say this one's good in advance, and just jump right into it.
If it isn't
Good
the
old Big
great
D.
and mighty...
Oh yeah, because they made a plushie. Yeah, because this was the ad they did.
Mad and drivel, which is my new favorite phrase,
Yep.
is the great and mighty Kevin Wetsworth.
He's
From the
British.
internet series Hunter the Parenting, hosted on the YouTube channel Brewer Alpha Busa, made by the production
Wait,
team
Busa?
Olga
What is
Papineau,
Busa?
and based on the World of Darkness intellectual property. If you aren't familiar with World of Darkness, to sum it up briefly,
Vampires are real. Sorry you had to find out about it this way.
That is actually the perfect cut to explain everything about World of Darkness in a very short terms. And anything longer than that gets really in the weeds really fast. People have tried. I just don't get it. It goes
cheers
over my head.
Irish. Though to be fair, it's a bit more complicated
fun,
than
though.
that. There are also demons that loved humanity
Yep,
too
here we
much.
go, here we
Mages
go.
which can alter the universe with their minds until the reality cops show up. Pocket dimensions, Assassin's Creed vampires, actual, literal Satan,
Yeah.
eco-terrorist werewolves,
Did you say 100% the good guy? Oh yeah, because this is a weird thing where God is a machine and or dead, and it could go both ways depending on the canon you use. And it's just a lot of weird shit. There's overlapping worlds, and you don't really mix and match until you do.
terrorist werewolves, look, I have done an analysis of this series before, specifically on the character of Big D, which
Yeah.
I recommend checking out if you want a bit more information on
It was
this
good.
world of madness.
Setting is off its shit.
What if they would do these with the characters from
Right,
Dune?
now that we've gotten that out of the way, Hunter the Parenting
Very
has a
different
lot of
show.
characters. A reckless scholar, an inflexible wall, an adorable child who is
Yep.
a magnet for the most horrific things imaginable, an exhausted Irish
Magic man.
a mega goth, and a mega weeb.
Oh god, it's shot!
Sex paddle away.
I forgot just how scared he was that she was there. Not that they were fighting, but that she was there. What she was doing didn't matter, just that it was her.
It's a yawa paddle, okay, boy?
Weeb just came out of left field to call her ex.
Yeah.
The entire
People explain
series
this to
is
me.
a masterfully
I
produced
regret
work
learning
of
it.
art in just about every aspect of its production. From its storylines, to its animations, to its tone, to its comedic timing, and everything outside and in between. But there are three things that ultimately make Hunter the Parenting stand out in my opinion. The three
Writing,
things that
funny
kept
animation.
bringing me back despite my utter lack of knowledge on World of Darkness as a property.
The scene he's pulling up right now to talk about the things that make this so great. And he pulls out this one that was done in memoriam for one of the members of the team making this, having a loss in their family. And they made this short, which is just a little bit of, hey, what would happen if this funny, lackadaisical, honestly insane, in multiple ways show was played straight? And it was horrific. And there's no monsters, there's just a lot of people suffering. And Big D sits with this lady who got turned into a vampire, killed everyone she loved in a blood rage as she was turned, and then just watched the sunrise with him. Which doesn't sound horrible until you remember vampire. Yeah. It was played straight, there was no humor, and it was just sad. Great on them for being able to do that, but also goddamn them for doing it so well. And if Cosmic is, I can't speak today. If Cosmic is bringing this specific scene up, even just as a background image, he's going to be talking about more of the depth they have here that's papered over by the out-and-out blatant insanity, which admittedly is very similar to how a lot of World of Darkness is kind of explained to me. There's blatant insanity, but there's a lot of dark depth. But then underneath the depth is a lot more insanity. It kind of goes back and forth.
And got me so interested that I went out of my way to learn far more about the property, to the point where I can now vaguely follow what the hell is going on at any given
Oh,
time.
he's farther on than me
Maybe.
then.
Those are the writing.
Wait, what point did he pull up there? Yeah. Ah, here we go. Of two, one falls, one rises, damnation. The third eye opens. His suet will feed and warm her gullet. Oh yeah, because Horse was going full prophecy mode. And there's people who understood what's going on. I'm not one of them still, and people tried to explain it. Also, I just realized his mane is torn off. That's what's going on over there. Oh. And for some reason I muted the audio. That's awkward.
At any given time. Maybe. Those are the writing, the dialogue, and the characters. The series' writing is phenomenal, well-paced, tense, and genuinely scary at times.
Yep.
But also light-hearted and darkly comedic in ways that you'd think would contradict one another,
yeah,
but
I remember
actually
this one.
work together incredibly well. The
just
dialogue
made
is
fun of
densely packed, hysterical,
not
and extremely
hobbits.
good at conveying both important information about the world, but also at characterizing the cast. The absolutely incredible voice acting does wonders for this point too, it must be said. And then you have the characters, where points 1 and 2 combine to create a cast of quirky, absurd, but deeply relatable, understandable, and human characters.
If he hasn't said already, I'm just going to jump to the point on this. It's not even that they have the characters. It's that they have a large, incredibly huge cast that in the last episode they expanded pretty much by doubling it. And they're almost all distinct. No single character feels like a knockoff of the others. It kind of felt that way with Brick and his goons, but even then they developed the goons even just the tiniest bit, so they are all visually distinct. I actually remembered Brick's name. Sorry, for me that's actually a weird thing because I don't remember names. I have a horrible time with it. It takes me months, and I don't even think this character was a main one. He didn't really interest me that. He's like, oh, cool, background character, and I remember his name. A lot of shows have huge casts. A lot of shows also have huge casts where there's actually 2 important ones, maybe 3, 4 if they're really good at what they do. And everyone else is a cardboard cutout who's there for filler. Generic clothing, generic looks, generic appearance, generic talking, because the writers don't give them personalities. They give them serviceable moments. There's probably a bunch of different shows you're thinking about right now. All of them are probably depressingly accurate. I'm so sorry for bringing them up. Not sorry enough, I'll cut this part out, though.
And one of my favorite aspects about the characters of this series is that they are just that. Deeply human. A lot of them fall into archetypes or have personality quirks, but they aren't just limited to them. None of them are any one thing. For example, Grimmel is a character who embodies a certain type of anime fan from the early 2000s. The kind of person that would unironically call herself an otaku without any real understanding of the cultural weight that that word would have in the country she's decided to obsess over.
I mean, that's literally everyone who does that. There's a lot of people who do that. It's actually happened to the point where the English language kind of has adapted to make the word wrong correctly. Yes. Everything I just said is actually how this goddamned language works. If you're wrong long enough, it becomes right. And if enough people agree with you, no one's going to be able to tell you otherwise. Because we actually do that. So her being an otaku is back when it wasn't actually correct to call someone an otaku. It was just that really embarrassing, oh, you don't know what you're saying. And you just kind of shake your head. Now it's, oh, they don't know what they're saying, but also it's the common parlance is how it's used in English, so it's correct again. Yeah, words.
But she's also someone who genuinely cares about her friends, and with deep regrets about how her relationship with Kitten went, clearly still has feelings for him, but regardless, the main thing she wants is for him to just be happy, but is terrible at conveying that in a way that he can understand or accept. Giles is first introduced as little more than a henchman to Brock Slackjaw.
Speaking of the Giles, I think that's Spit over there. Oh, it's Brock instead of Brit. Well, I got that wrong. Nothing new there. Yeah, these two, they were more or less carbon cutouts with slightly bigger cheeks, slightly more sallow cheeks. And at this point, they are very distinct characters. We have him being the more smart one who's kind of in with a bad crowd, which would actually be the place he works, not the crazy asshole he's a hench for. And this guy who... They made him distinct, all right. I'm not going to say a word of how they did it because that's not only a spoiler for the last episode, but also something I don't believe I could describe on YouTube accurately without age restricting this video because god damn, man.
But we later see him
Speaking of
working
his
a job he hates and gets no respect
Yep.
at. To the point
Normal.
where even after D basically screws with him, he's still willing to go out of his way to help D out on 2 separate occasions, despite him
That part
being
isn't normal.
nothing but a nuisance while he was
Maybe
there,
you should
for no
pass it on
reason
to
other than
horrible.
that D was nice to him. And Brock is introduced as nothing more than a hooligan who harasses Marcus and his friends, but is described by D as having potential throughout Chapter 4, and
Okay, I like to make one preface here. He is also just a hooligan who harasses Marcus and his friends. He is not anything other than that. He has additional traits, but he is also very much that. That is very much him all the way through by choice. His reasoning will probably come up more, and it's probably something more based on his father, based on what we've seen of his father. But yeah, he has potential, but also he is exactly as bad as he comes off as, which is funny because I don't think he's the bad guy. He's that asshole who happens to be on your side and not wrong.
seems to be quite competent at his job at head of security for the Yarmouth Chapter House.
I'd say that's debatable considering how the last episode went.
Chorus of strangulation aside, in total fairness, D and his crew did break in, and he's shown to be observant at recognizing when Occam had been missing. His main weakness is shown that he doesn't think for himself all that much and is very deferential to his father's wishes. And D is the archetype of someone who is on the surface borderline insane with no real rhyme or reason to any of his actions.
I mean, admittedly, he might also be insane with moments of sanity. That's one part that even though we had analyzed it and we went through this and we've seen the show, Big D is really intense. He does paper over a lot of his actual motivations, his deep-seated fears, and his concerns with what might happen if the knowledge gets out, because it can kill you with over-the-top jolly insanity. But also, he is also jolly and insane on top of that. It's a mask, but it's not a completely inaccurate mask. It's just slightly fused with his flesh, like halfway down. It's a very disturbing mask. In fact, let's never use this metaphor again. It gets really flayed one really fast, and I'd rather not.
But in reality, his absurdity hides a man who clearly knows what he's doing, who has vast quantities of knowledge, but is still prone to making mistakes when it comes to dealing with those closest to him. But those mistakes are informed by the vast knowledge that he has and the desire to protect them. But a standout amongst all of them is Kevin. Kevin is, without question, my absolute favourite character within Hunter the Parenting, bar none. The only ones who even come close are Grimmel and D, and I am far from the only person who has a
Dude! Hey! Excellent! Monty burns intensifies. Fuck yeah, man! Dude, I got featured. I know, I'm a weeb. I'm smiling at this one. Big D and Kevin interactions adds decades to my life. They're all so wonderful. Yes, they are.
Particular affinity for this psoriasis-laden man. Throughout its first arc, Kevin only made a physical appearance in 4, arguably 5 episodes out of a 13-episode arc. Of this, he appeared in one scene in An Adorable Family Trip, one scene in D's Guide to Avoiding Arrest, and one short. His debatable appearance is in The Blender Crusade Corporate Villainy, when D occasionally hears Kevin's voice in his head. He makes his only full-length appearance in The Probing of Kevin. So let's be charitable here and include the entire scene.
Wait. No, he was involving the episodes from the chapter house, and he put up scenes of that. So that's very much something he's referencing. And Kevin was involved. He's using it because it was an ad read, not an actual character moment. Although I would love if in the actual show, Big D just happened to make these because it would piss someone off.
In which he appears in the first episode, and not just his actual screen time, and also count his lines from the Blender Crusade. If you remove all of the credits from the episodes, the first arc of Hunter the Parenting ends up at 6 hours and 30 minutes. Kevin appears in 58 minutes and 48 seconds of it, 33 minutes and 58 seconds of which come from the probing of Kevin alone, less than a sixth of the total runtime of the arc.
Oh wow.
But that is all the time it took for him to become a fan favorite. If I had to pick a single...
In fact, it's probably backed up by the fact that the Fumofo I mentioned, the one that we had in the very beginning, is literally of Kevin, the first toy they made. Unless there was another that I completely missed, which is entirely possible, in which case I need to get on that.
Word to describe Kevin... Okay, if I had to pick one word to describe him, it would be hysterical, but if I had to pick a second word, it would be that same one that I used to describe so many others in the series. Human. And that is an odd choice of words for Kevin, because Kevin is a vampire. Not only that, he self-identifies as an evil vampire wizard, and before he met the family of hunters, he was part of a group which, putting things politely for the time being, is...
I know what he's about to say, but let's be completely honest. Normally when someone says, I'm an evil vampire wizard, you go to two different options. Lawyer or accountant. And Kevin actually was an accountant. So there's an argument to be made here, facetiously, that he really didn't change his crowd that much.
Is not exactly open to the, well, concept of humanity. He's a character
Yeah.
built off of multiple ironies, many of them due to sheer circumstance and bad luck on his part, of which he had no real say in. And when given the chance and the inspiration to believe that he can, he steps away from it all. In doing so, he becomes not only a representative of the duality inherent in vampires in this setting, it becomes a near-perfect example of what I would consider to be a celebration of the everyday, normal, mundane world. And that makes him the perfect kind of character for a series set in such a bleak yet absurd universe as the World of Darkness.
bleak?
In this analysis, I
Honestly,
want to go over...
This is the part I never really got, because everyone says it's so bleak and so dark, and if you play it straight, it does feel that way. But a lot of the overarching themes, when they don't go batshit insane, and they do go batshit insane a lot, seem to be, this is some dark shit, but the overarching theme is humanity. For a lot of vampire, it's how do you retain what makes you human, what makes you sane, and living life in a way that is good and enjoyable, as opposed to becoming a ravening monster who exists to cause pain to yourself and others because nothing else is there and the insanity is the only escape you had left. And while that sounds bleak, the other side is very much the light of trying to not be horrible, which, as far as game concepts go, is kind of fascinating and doesn't seem bleak in the slightest, other than the fact that they're constantly challenging it, so you have to work for it. But on the other, I guess it's like the opposite in a dark mirror of 40k, where 40k is grimdark mostly, and it's bad, and it's going to get worse, and people are bad, and they're going to get worse. This seems more like the entire tone of the world is grim bright, where it's bad, but there are people who are going to try, although that really does depend on how you interpret it. And because of its setting, it's kind of like D&D in the sense that the tone very much depends on your specific group when you play it, or any media you engage with. But I'd say it leans more towards grim bright, because you're actively fighting to not be a monster, or to get rid of the monsters, and trying to make it better. Followed by anyone who wants to change the tone to make it grim dark again, where it's like, it's bad, you're going to fight against it, you're going to fail and become one. It really does depend on how you interpret it, I guess.
why I adore Kevin
complicated.
so much, why he's such a standout character within the series, and why so many of us are enraptured by him. But I also want to talk about him on a bit of a deeper level, because I think to many Kevin is little more than the ha-ha funny words vampire man, which he is, don't get me wrong, but
One
I
of
think that
many.
there is more to him than
That's
that.
a lot of
And to
characters.
really figure that out, you need to look at him and everything surrounding him in a bit more depth. Analyzing Kevin in this way is a tricky
Buffoomo.
thing, though. Topics like politics, philosophy, and morality are essential to understanding what makes him work. And he's not a character like D, where how he stands in opposition to the themes of the setting are what make him work. At least, not right away. Which means I'm going to have to go into them
Oh, I see what he's going to do. So he's breaking down the first level, which is how we initially engage with Kevin, followed by the second level, which is him as a person who is forced into that first level. And then probably a third level, which is him trying to rationalize being more of that first level human, forced into a first or second level human, first level vampire on top. And the third level is the mental delusion he had that was worked through by letting him act more human again. If that's where it's going, that's actually going to be fascinating.
here, and that could get uncomfortable at times, so consider this your one warning. But mostly,
Bring
I
it.
just want to talk about one of my favorite characters from a series that I adore, so let's delve right in, shall we?
Don't you dare turn me into a marketable plushy mortal!
Make this actually happen in the show,
Kevin's
just like random
introduction to
people
the
have
series
this.
is what you would expect from an average creature in the setting, albeit significantly sillier.
first
When he's
episode,
first
yeah.
introduced alongside the rest of his pack in Chapter 1, Kevin establishes himself as arguably the biggest threat to the family of hunters. On the surface, he doesn't really look like much, especially when he's put next to the rest of his pack. Frankly
Wow. You know, it's only been maybe a year or two since the first episode came out, but the animation style really has changed a lot. Here, there was a lot more crayon aspect, and it's still there, but there was a lot less fluidity. And even then, that's just good highlight to show just it has so many more options to how they animate things.
Speaking, he looks ridiculous, and he
Yes.
acts equally as daft.
Yes.
He's nowhere near as intimidating as Grangel Ape Boy over here, or Piotr,
Really?
who is just nightmare.
Piotr was
fuel.
absolutely
And
terrifying.
compared to their bearded Briker Bro, Brewha Buddy Boy, who is built like a goddamn combat Humvee, Kevin appears to be particularly scrawny. I do feel the need to point out as well, him dressing up like a wizard is
Not helping.
something any of the vampire clans do. That is a him thing. Why specifically he feels the need to do this is thoroughly beyond me. It is dumb, it is nonsense, and I love it. But
Yeah.
his bizarre fashion
It's a
sense
misconception
aside,
on his part
what
that
he does
wizards have to
that
dress
sets
like
him
wizards,
distinctly
probably.
apart from the others are his supernatural abilities. Namely, as a Tremere, he has access to certain supernatural abilities that his clan can use, with which he can dominate other people's minds and suppress their will, leaving them unable to move or resist him in any way, unless they have countermeasures in place to deal with it. Unfortunately for him, he's up against the Golden Goose Gang, so they do have countermeasures to deal with it. He ends up captured and taken back to the Hunter's residence, where he's held hostage
got
and
better.
interrogated by D. First things first though, when it comes to Kevin, and reason number one why Kevin is such a favourite, he has the best lines, and the best delivery of any character in the show.
Oh, that is a contentious point. Not that Kevin doesn't have good lines, but there's a lot of good voice acting and really fun lines that have just that little snap at the end that make them memorable. I think this might be more down to his personal take, just because I know the scene he's about to bring up. It is amazing. But Kevin is... Oh, that's... Best of the entire show, though? That is a high bar to get over on that one. I don't think he can cover that one.
Suck up your liquids and
It's
then piss them out over the
gross.
deflated balloon that will be your remains.
He probably enjoys that.
So funny, oh my god. Fuck! Where do you get all of this?
I am an accountant. Do you know how much I hate mankind?
That's basically average.
Kevin, stop! I can't take it, my lungs.
I mean, that is a really good line. And I just, God damn it. I made the entire point saying he doesn't have the best lines, but then he pulls out a really good line. I'm going to save this for a few accountants I know. They're going to hate it, but they're not going to disagree.
Please have mercy. Other than that, the first impressions of Kevin are that, ridiculousness aside, he is fully capable of backing his absurdity with his actions. That he is this inhumane monster with extremely...
Oh, yeah, because he showed off the entire durability by, well, being the scrawny one, but also still making a terrifying moment. I think just this entire
absurdity
scene
with his
right here
actions.
from the
That
first episode,
he is
too.
this inhumane
He looks so
monster
different.
with extremely powerful abilities beyond the comprehension of the mundane. Even when next to the other vampires that surround him, which are both terrifying and very capable of kicking the living crap
But this is the
out
first
of the
one that
hunters,
showed
none
the
of them can do
inhuman
anything even
durability.
close to what Kevin can. Piotr can blend into his environment, but that isn't even the same ballpark of what Kevin is capable of. After the family has dealt with the other three packmates, you might be tempted to, just for a moment, think that this is the worst that vampires can get.
Oh, no.
And then Kevin comes out of right field to inform you that no, they can get much worse, you idiot. He's just this whole other fiend.
Just like the
Serves as
blood
both an
everywhere in his
indicator
eyes
for
and
how
nose.
absurd this world can get, how powerful the things that hide in the dark are, and also the family's competency at hunting down these creatures. Because the moment that they understand what they're dealing with and get an opening, they're able to counter him pretty easily. All of this comes together for a very effective...
I just realized why this scene looks so weird to me. You can see his nose and lips. Oh, that is weird. Because he's still wearing the sock mask head thing. I mean, they're all doing it, even the boy, but it just looks so weird on Kitten.
A very effective introductionary episode, of which Kevin plays a major part of pulling off. Following up from that, in the phenomenal The Probing of Kevin,
Such
which
a
is
good
one of
episode.
my absolute favourite pieces of Hunter the Parenting, D utilizes the real-world, extremely effective interrogation tactic of just kind of vibing with Kevin and developing a rapport with him in order to
Okay, one thing he's saying here, the tried and true interrogation technique of vibing and getting along. It sounds stupid. There's no way this works, except this is actually something that has historical and constant proof of working really damn well. It's not even just the entire, what is it? Oslo syndrome? No, the one where you start to empathize with your captors and you start to love them and it gets creepy and it's a form of mental illness. No, this is where you are actually a good person. And there are documented cases of American POWs taken by Germany in World War II who were interrogated by someone whose name I cannot remember, and I wish I could for this moment here, but I didn't think I need to bring it up. And after the war ended, he was brought over to America, the interrogator from the Germans, the actual Nazi interrogator, brought over to America, sponsored by the people he was interrogating. He also got the information on them, but they were POWs who were not privy to all the plans, and the plans they did know they were already captured during, so it didn't really matter too much. But this is the level of, if you can get a good rapport, you can make people love you. Because just being nice, when they're not expecting you to be nice, is really damn powerful. Also because torture is absolutely useless, because people will tell you anything, so any information you get is inherently useless. Yeah.
To make him more comfortable with talking about himself, his life, and how he ended up with his pack. Kevin was embraced into the clan Tremere, one of the most authoritarian and hierarchical vampire clans, which is itself part of a social organization made up of multiple clans known as a sect. This sect was the Camarilla. The Camarilla are an extremely traditional sect which focus on maintaining the status quo of vampire society, and due to that, a lot of its structure reflects the feudal era of Dark Age Europe. Now, the Tremere are bastards, frankly.
Yeah.
Their entire clan hierarchy is dominated by what they call the pyramid. One of the tools that they use to keep their members in line is something called a blood bond. Essentially, they forcefully addict members to vampire blood and then brainwash them in order to turn them into obedient and unflinchingly loyal thralls to their sires or a superior within the clan. The way that Kevin describes the blood bond is that there's a voice in your head constantly gaslighting you, telling you that any feelings of animosity that you may have towards your sire are repellent and disgusting, until you just accept that, and become utterly devoted to your sire, however brutal or abusive they are towards you.
And this is one of the reasons that Master Effect's mind control is one of the most disturbing, terrifying things possible. But it's almost impossible to show just how fucked up it is. It works in writing because you have that depth to go into and explain mental processes to show how it works. And it's working here because we could stop and have someone who is good at wording talk about it, to describe it, to give that visceral what the fuckery. It also helps that they're on the screen so you can engage with it more directly. But in a lot of media where they're not focusing on that, mind control is, oh, you're listening to what I say now. Now you're not. Oh, cool. No, but this is one of the parts I really love because they did and they got into it and they showed this is the level of, you know, it is wrong. You want to scream, but you stopped even understanding why you wanted to scream. It's not even that you don't have a mouth you can't scream. You haven't even progressed that far yet. You've gone further and it's so horrid and I love it. Considering I was the one who was just talking about how this is a dark, bright setting in many ways. Yeah, still like it, still think that, but that doesn't mean they're not really dark, and this is part of that darkness.
That sire or superior is then in turn blood bonded to someone higher up in the pyramid, and so on until it reaches the heads of the clan.
Great until you get someone who's
so
insane, doesn't care what
Kevin
they
was
think.
brought into a strict hierarchy within a strict hierarchy. Wonderful. Throughout his interrogation with Dee, we also learned that he's a 9th generation vampire. And how that works is, to oversimplify things, the closer to the 1st generation you are, the more absurdly powerful you get. Being a 9th generation makes him relatively powerful in comparison to many modern vampires. It gave him the most potent generational blood of his pack at the very least. But even with that power, he's still utterly subservient to the pyramid. It's here where the Sabbat comes into play, another sect which we'll go into more detail on later. But to make that story short, the Sabbat have a ritual where they can make a communal blood bond which shatters all other blood bonds. So Kevin joins and undergoes this rite, escaping the pyramid, the Tremere, and the Camarilla.
Which is still impressive in its own right, because he would have to think clearly enough to understand that he wanted to break out, which I'm not sure it's going to be touched on because I don't know if they're going to bring up these events since that entire arc is more or less over. We might get more of the blood bond with his superiors, but not the blood bond with the Sabbat. It takes a lot to break mental mind control, and they're playing it up as if it is impossible to do, nearly. It's just kind of cool to see that, and kind of wish they put a little more into that.
His life from there has mostly just been him on the run, hiding from both and fighting with other sects, until he ran into Dee in the tunnels in Chapter 1. So that's his introduction, and a bit about how he ended up where he did. But what about before he was embraced? Well, Kevin was an accountant, and that's kind of it.
Yeah,
There wasn't really a
he was
ton
cool with
to
it.
Kevin before he was embraced. It's a bit of a weird paradox, but this actually makes Kevin one of the most fascinating characters in the series. Let me explain. One of the best parts of World of Darkness to me are the kinds of people that it chooses to focus on when it comes to setting up a campaign.
Oh, so he's talking about you either have people who are normal Joes forced into the most disturbing situations, or you have a lot of backstory going on when it's really interesting.
Namely, completely normal, everyday people. World of Darkness is a world of
Big dude with
complete
the
and
crazy
utter
backstory.
incomprehensibility, unfathomable complexity,
Hell, even these
and
guys are
absurdist
backstory.
madness. But it is like that for a few reasons, and one of the reasons for that is that you aren't special. This is a world of creatures of near godlike power and influence, where figures and concepts that you thought you fully understood have secret dark twists, where practically everything has a double meaning and 16 layers of
Oh shit, I forgot that's how Pyotr used to look. God damn, man.
complexity, with planet spirits and a dream dimension and the Fae doing whatever the buttery biscuit fuck they're doing for God knows whatever reason. Or
I mean, in general, that's pretty accurate to mythology, Fae. The more you learn about them, the more you realize they are terrifying.
whales. Just in general. Look, Wales is lovely, don't get me wrong, but in World of Darkness, that place is a who's who of what the hell is going on.
Oh,
Particularly
wow.
in the north, which also happens to be home to the town of...
Stand by to push Gwingish, go get it from Drubble, and to Silir, go, go, go.
That's not a
Yes, of
joke.
course it is. Suddenly Wells next to sea doesn't seem such an absurd name now, does it?
What are you clacking babbling about?
I know it seems like I'm rambling, Kevin, but I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. Anyway, for all of this, whether you're a vampire, a mage, an imbued, or just some random person who learned that all the other groups existed, you have just been thrown into the middle of it all and told, alright, prick, have fun figuring this out and staying alive and also sane. Even
I mean, not for the mage. They explicitly are insane. That is very much the best part about that. You are insane to start with, and the less crazy you are, the less powerful you are. My personal interpretation on that one. But also, the more you learn about mages, the more I'm like, oh, shit, this is so broken. You can't really do anything with it unless you decide reality is an option.
in the cases where you are playing a character where you are fully in the know right from the beginning, like a werewolf, you're not much more than a beginner. You're a small insignificant speck finding its place in the wider universe. A wider universe made up of dozens of different groups, all with their own perceptions, beliefs, terminology and goals that you just have to figure out and deal with. You are isolated in a world you don't understand, surrounded by incomprehensible horror, hostility and confusion. And Kevin represents this perfectly. He didn't know about any of this before he was embraced. He didn't know about mages or werewolves or changelings or the secret kingdoms which intersect with the world as we know it, or
didn't know about that either.
He barely even knows that much about the history of his own clan.
Dude! I am a 27-year-old accountant
Oh yeah, I forgot he was only 27 years old. I keep forgetting that part.
turned wizard. I do not know ye old fun facties.
He had a job, an apartment, goals, dreams, all of which were robbed from him when he was embraced. And he's been dragged into a world of complicated politics, backstabbing, secrecy, and concepts beyond what he thought was real. He's had to piece it together from wherever he can, from whatever he can. And he, like everyone else who learns about the shadow worlds beyond the consensus, is completely out of his depth. He's just a random guy. Like I said, when it comes to Kevin's backstory, him being an accountant is kind of it, but that's not to say that there isn't more to him. When you put together his life and his own perspective on it, he becomes a very understandable, sympathetic, and tragic character.
Because Kevin is in many ways the everyman. Where Big D is way too insane to be it, and every other character is very much a distinct, well, character. Kevin is here is someone who's just normal, and you can see yourself really easily in, I did things, I thought it was getting better, and then shit happened I had no control over, and it went downhill. That is basically the gist of it. Or I guess the gist.
I did this
Yeah, all
before
this
with my
just all
analysis of
happened
D,
too.
and I don't particularly like the thought of doing the exact same thing again here, but I cannot stress this enough. I do not think that it is possible to fully convey just how human this vampire wizard is without playing his parable from the probing of Kevin in full.
And he's going to bring up how Kevin is the most human because of that, and not just the everyman, but his entire dichotomy of a character is he's the everyman who was forced to not be the everyman anymore. So while he stood in for everyone, he can't stand in for anyone more, but he still feels like he does. And that difference is probably one of the things that makes this character very memorable.
At the very least, I know that I do not have the words to fully convey how much this speech
I
humanizes
know the scene he's
him.
going to do, and it's still good.
So, for
Third
lack
time's
of
the
a
charm.
better alternative, let's have a look
Do
at a
it.
parable.
A parable about one named Kevin Westwood.
Yoink.
Kevin was born in Ipswich to a middle-class family. His parents were devout followers of the status quo and primed him with all the tools necessary to lead a pleasant, stagnant, unexceptional life. Kevin became an accountant, about the only field in which he truly excelled. But his dream was always to accomplish something more.
I just realized now that I've heard it, the audio work here is when he talked about his dreams in this part, you heard a bit of the chains. Let's see if we can hear it again.
Dream was always to accomplish some
Let's
field
see.
in which he truly excelled.
Yep, the field he truly excelled, and then you hear the chains rattle. Because in scene, he's chained up. But when he's talking about the only thing he excelled in, it felt like he was chained up, so they added a little bit of chain in there. Is that intentional or just to add variety to the audio? I don't know. It could very well be that. But it does really hammer home that he's chained in based on what was happening in the past, but also where he's at right now.
But his dream was always to accomplish something more. So he broke away from his life in the suburbs, moved a bit further north. He decided he will make it big. He will do something with his life. He failed. And so, Kevin got a job as an accountant in Great Yarmouth. But Kevin never gave up. Don't you understand? Kevin may have been trapped in the mire. He may have been an uninspiring person trapped in a dead-end job. His dreams and aspirations might have been dying, but they weren't dead. Not completely. He was going to make his name. He was going to make rent every week. He was going to move up, see the world. He was going to do something, anything, to make people know his name.
And everything here is why I think he fits in really well as the everyman. I should probably explain. The reason I'm saying everyman specifically is because this is a character trope or a character trait or, honestly at this point, a cliche that is a very distinct character who can more or less be the self-insert prior to the term self-insert becoming a thing. It's the old form of that. He is basically doing that. He's a little darker than the classic everyman, which was just generic as fuck. Just did his thing, went away, never did anything, had nothing distinguishable about him. This version of Kevin I can't speak today. Kevin, where he talked about trying to succeed and failing and being dragged down, but then trying against it, is a little more optimistic than the standard classical everyman. But it feels more realistic to normal day where you try, and you take your chance at your dreams, and then it fails, and you just try to make your way through life anyways. And he's still a little more determined than that, but it's still close enough where I think he does fit into that. And then we get to the twist that comes right after this.
And then Kevin died.
Yep.
And now you know the rest.
Well, perhaps I know a part, but neither of us know the ending.
Spare me your optimism. It was stolen from me along with my life. You cannot know the feeling of the embrace. To wake one day, your skin cold, your heart still, ravenous, inhuman. But once there was a world, friends, colleagues. Now there is only prey and treachery. This story comes to no good end. I cannot follow my dreams. I must scrounge to stay alive or sane. I cannot remain human any longer. My only hope is to embrace a shadow of this dream. To embrace the beast. And hope freedom is on the other side.
I know I talked about this when I saw the video, but as he became more and more depressed while speaking, you just saw his actual facial features retreat into his beard. It's like all you see is the outline of his teeth and nothing more. It's such good choices here.
Freedom never comes through surrender.
Perhaps not.
Okay, the chains definitely have to be intentional. I can't believe I missed this part for the audio design. As soon as he's seeking a way to talk about how he's chained up, you just hear the chains reminding you that, yeah, no, he's still chained up. He's very much not free.
That's the only chance I have
Cosmic brings
left.
that up.
This right here is why Kevin works. Even to someone who knows next to nothing about World of Darkness and only knew Hunter the Parenting as a show about vampire hunters, this alone elevates the series from a mindless monster hunting series into something with far greater depth, and turns Kevin from the ha-ha funny wizard into a real person.
Who's
And
also
in
a ha-ha
doing
funny
so,
wizard.
Shows just how vampirism is a curse, and what that curse does to people. Kevin's parable is sad, it's depressing, and it's relatable. What he chooses to talk about the most is what he's lost ever since he became a vampire. It's just normal everyday stuff. He doesn't just have unique problems that can only exist in this shadowy underhive. They're problems faced by everyday people. Kevin works because he's so normal. Because we're all worried about the things that Kevin worried about.
And that's why I brought up the Everyman, everything Cosmic just said. And this is exactly correct. I don't disagree with a bit about this. Best line? That's still debatable. But yeah, he works because you can relate to him. In the same way that Big D works because he is so insane, but also you see that there's more to him than that. There's so many ways characters can be created, and this is a very unique one because I should probably mention one thing about the Everyman. I mentioned that there's an Everyman in Kevin, but then it had a twist. Most Everyman stays that way. They are very good to give the reader or the audience, because a lot of times it's used in plays, or the gameplay character, because choose your own character is usually an Everyman, or long-haired off-brand protagonist that has the eyes covered. It's the same protagonist. It's the same type of character who is the self-insert, who is the person you're allowed to see through because their entire character is normal. Kevin is definitely the Everyman, but he's very much twisted from that. And that twist is what makes him so compelling and depressing, but also fascinating. And I think that's kind of where Cosmic is going on this one. Because Kevin isn't the Everyman by the time he meets Dee. But you can see that he very much was, and that's what made him unique.
Being stuck in a job he hates, not being able to accomplish any of his goals, having those plans that you never really got around to.
Yeah.
Vampires are a tricky supernatural creature. They're capable of living for millennia and attaining many powers and abilities.
But
On the surface, vampirism doesn't seem like too bad a deal, but it comes with a great number of caveats. For example, vampires can't withstand the sun at all. They have to be active at night. Whereas humanity are mostly diurnal, they can operate both in the day and at night. Vampires gain access to supernatural abilities, but all humans are either sleeper mages or awakened mages, fully capable of learning magics that vastly overpower the vampires. Vampires can only...
wait, all humans are sleeper mages? Was not aware of that fact. I mean, any mage is bullshit, and the fact that a mage tried to become a vampire seems like a downgrade, but that's just how the lore went, and whatever. I didn't realize all of them could be. That's a little surprising.
consume blood and occasionally flesh from humans, thus making them vital to their survival, whereas humanity are fully capable of surviving without vampires. Each progressive generation of vampires gets weaker, while each generation of humans enters a more and more technologically and socially adapted civilization.
Although, from what I heard, the weakest possible thin blood vampire out there would more or less be a daywalker and could basically return to being human without actually having a downside. Actually, at that point, while they could never be as strong as the upper vampires, they have none of the weaknesses and just a couple minor buffs to standard level human. It sounds almost like they're so weak that it becomes an advantage in its own right. But I also heard apparently that triggered end times. I'm not sure if the new World of Darkness did that. Yeah, that is, the old World of Darkness is confusing enough as it is. I barely even touch the new world because it's like, you know what? I'll wait until I get further immersed in the setting.
Despite its immediate appeal, vampirism is a curse upon those that are infected with it, because ultimately, being a vampire puts an incredible number of restrictions on you in exchange for a few perks. And while humanity doesn't get those perks, they get to be free. And this dynamic is what Kevin embodies perfectly, because vampirism took that away from him, and he hates it, and he wants that life back. Because despite all of its many flaws, living as a human is preferable to living like a vampire, where he can't enjoy a bagel or a sunrise, or just enjoy a conversation with a friend because he can't be sure that they won't stab him in the back in order to climb to power in a ruthless hierarchy, or even just have control over his own thoughts. And if his parable demonstrates anything, it's that the one thing Kevin values more than anything in the world is that freedom that he lost. Yet Kevin never gave up. Perhaps
And that would be why Big D loved him so much, because Big D's entire thing is to be a rebel, to be the punk, to be the person shattering restrictions against the man in order. Doing what you want when you want because you're being told to do otherwise is very much Big D's entire shtick. So Kevin basically is a normal human telling Big D exactly what he wanted to hear. Someone who would get him.
Perhaps that's the most admirable thing about him. Thrown into a world that is well beyond his grasping after having his previous life and everything else taken from him, he keeps trying. He keeps doing everything that he can to make something out of the situation he's in. He's a persistent bastard. It's hard to hear about his life and all he's been through and not want him to just get that one win. Perhaps that's part of what makes his alliance with Dee so appealing. To get along, they argue in the way that only people who get along can, and he does so of his own free will. It's like he's gotten back just a sliver of the humanity he felt he lost. And perhaps that's what makes his turning away from the Sabbat so deeply fulfilling.
Yep.
Because it makes you think that maybe Dee is right, that he can claw his way out from this. And if Kevin can do that, so can other vampires. And that is one way of viewing Kevin.
What's
I
the
actually
other?
have two different ways of looking at him.
Oh?
And I hold both of them at the same time.
Now, this is interesting because I know and agree with the way we've been showing Kevin so far. A different way to view Kevin is not going to be the one I more or less subscribe to because it isn't one I've considered. So everything we're going to get on this part out is going to be new information or a new way of viewing his actions.
And to understand the
Ooh.
second perspective, we need to understand the Sabbat, which means it's time to talk about how the Sabbat are fascists. So World of
Really?
Darkness and Hunt
I
for
thought they were just
Parenting are
stupid.
pretty brazenly open with the fact that the Sabbat are fascists. In Chapter 2, If the Vampires Had a Tortured Wrestling Match, Marcus explicitly refers to them as such. So, you know, disagree with my thesis now, dickheads. But okay, I'll do my job. To back that up, we need to know exactly what fascism is. To do that, we're going to have to go over the definition of fascism. That is a problem, because fascism is an inherently inconsistent ideology that has manifested itself in incredibly different ways every time it's cropped up. It is
Okay, this is going to be interesting. Mostly because there's a very stable political interpretation of this, but he's actually acknowledging that it's more a label that's applied, and the people who do it sometimes don't even realize it would apply to them and don't like the label applied to them, even if it does completely match it.
isn't really one ideology of consistent belief, but rather a mishmash of different beliefs, many of which are contradictory.
Yeah.
Basically, it's vibes-based. So for the purposes of analysis, the easiest way I can think to do this would be to go over the essentials of what a fascist society would look like. Then we're going to compare and
I think the society needs to be in air quotes on that one.
contrast that against the Sabbat. Once we've established this, we can start to go over this secondary perspective on Kevin, because establishing the political undertones of the Sabbat is key to understanding that. So, to put it in the broadest series of terms possible, fascism is an authoritarian, hierarchical ideology. It is exclusionary, and will usually seek to empower one group above all others. And a group can be very broad. It can be anyone inside a given territory, or it can be very narrow, such as people that are within a certain culture or an ethnic group, or both. But it is by definition exclusionary of anyone not a part of it. It has strict authoritarian control, which suppresses all opposition.
Not wrong
It
so far.
regards those who act against their interests either as the enemy or as traitors. It will
This isn't wrong. I mean, it's very much surface level, but that's also because he's not wrong about it also being very much vibes based. There's a lot of political writing and political science majors that argue about this, and let's put it this way. I'm glad I'm an English major, man. At least when we argue about stupid shit, you can at least come to an understanding that we might not agree, but we're not calling the other person... What was the phrase that was used? Literally bankrupt, and I don't even remember at this point. Basically, people who had a lot of words but didn't use them correctly, and at that point, I just don't really... It's someone who knows just enough word to say bad thing, but not enough word to know what word mean. I know I'm putting that as the dumbest way possible, but yeah, political science majors, men, are kind of scary.
will often levy fear of other groups as a justification for crackdowns, preemptive invasions, and the removal of, quote, undesirables. As a subcategory of these 2 points, despite being, you know, obviously the ones doing the whole persecuting thing, most fascists will view themselves as the ones being persecuted, or their actions as being a justified response to it. Fascism demands a strict social hierarchy, usually based on what it perceives to be natural distinctions between different groups of people. To put it simply, it has an extremely strong emphasis on what people should be, as opposed to giving them the freedom to decide what to be for themselves. In short, it suppresses the liberty of the individual in the name of the group or territory.
And this is why it's going to be interesting, because Kevin basically dipped into fascism as a way to escape the hierarchical, which sounded very much close. It was basically a fascistic thing, but was even older, so it was more feudal, which is an oddly less welcoming, but also more welcoming system. More welcoming that anyone can join, less welcoming that anyone can join the bottom.
Rules over, and it often appeals to a mythologized past and a return to it. For example, Italy was a country run by fascists in 1922.
Oh yeah,
Italy
Mussolini
was historically the home of the Roman Empire, which these fascists
I mean, they also tore themselves apart and split in two, and they made the Holy Roman Empire, and that was just a giant pile of, yeah, we're united. The air quotes are very necessary for that one.
sought to rebuild in their time. Also, they're militaristic. I probably should have opened with that in hindsight.
Yeah, that one actually is a little less necessary, just because that's a lot of different cultures and nationalities, to the point where it being so across the board that having one that's not militaristic is more important than what is. It's just too common.
I could go far more in depth, but none of that would be particularly relevant to what we're talking about here. This is basically all the information that we're going to need. So, now that we have a rough idea on the basics of fascism, let's go over the Sabbat. Some of the more surface level things we'll get out of the way quickly. The pack is clearly hierarchical. When Pyotr, the leader of the group, tells Abe to shut up, he shuts up, even though he's clearly not happy about it. They've made it clear that they're more than happy to use force to achieve all their aims, which we'll be going into shortly, and actively use force against the Camarilla, which stands in the way of them being able to actually do any of this. Like a bro old man here goes off on a rant about how vampires are persecuted by the refusal of humanity to bow down to their, quote, betters. When attempting to coax the family into joining them and becoming vampires, one of Pyotr's points is that they would get to experience supremacy over other humans. Ape in particular keeps going on about living as their forefathers did, referencing a great past. Perhaps one of the only ways in which the analogy breaks down here is that in World of Darkness, the imagined past that they're referring to is actually real in the forms of the first and second cities, which were basically vampire-run god kingdoms.
And from what I heard, they went great until they didn't, and then they really didn't, and oh god, did they not go great. And also the people who would come back if they ever actually succeed in returning to the past would be the people who fucked it up. So yeah, one of the apocalypses I've been told about and did understand was the people who caused shit to happen were the reason it woke up, and that's why the old world of darkness died, among many other reasons that may or may not have happened at the same time, and it kind of went all over the place, so it's got confusing, and at some point I just break down, it's like, okay, they're ending every franchise at the same time, and they're just trying to make it a little more sane, but also the replacement one is not nearly as fleshed out, so they didn't think about it enough. It's good, but it doesn't have the same, well, gravitas is the best way to put it. The one thing I would say about this is, for everything that Cosmic is describing right here, this does match up with fascism, but it's also kind of codified as standard villain template. So a lot of the times people don't realize they're describing what would be fascistic when they just do this. An easy villain is someone who looks like a Nazi. Does that happen to also show Nazi traits? Yes, fascism was a Nazi thing. But it's become such a codified, easy go-to what is villain that most people don't think through to show that they're fascistic. And while this might actually be one of those cases where it's not, because they did have Marcus make that comment about being fascist vampires, I would definitely say that while it might be known on the writing side, I would definitely say as far as in-universe characters knowing that. If only because, well, their group would have predated actual fascists. Now, if anything, they could probably make the argument that the fascists were copying the vampires. But it's complicated because while they match, it's so part of the common terminology of how to talk about bad shit people that it's just become too common. It's a trope, and then it just happens to resemble what it looks like. Cosmic's Enemy, he's kind of setting himself up for a really hard sell on this one. It looks like a fascist, it sounds like a fascist, it quacks like a fascist, but it could still be a goose instead of a duck. Also, if you get that reference, neat. I don't know why I brought it up, but neat.
But I mean, that doesn't exactly make them less fascist. The Roman Empire did in fact exist. That didn't make Italy less fascist. So moving on to
And
the
made them fall
deeper
apart.
stuff, the ultimate
A lot.
goal of the Sabbat is to do away with the masquerade and rule humanity openly as vampires. Piotr puts
That
it
definitely
best
will
when
fail.
he says,
Your kind are just livestock. That's it.
Also, the more you know about mages, the more you realize that that would never work. The mages, the vampires, the demons, the mummies, basically, vampires are the be-all, end-all until you get to all of the others. And then, yeah, no.
That's just the way of things. No matter what you do, mortals are just meat.
But the thing is, they're also being portrayed in such a way that this is... It sounds like generic, how do we sound evil easily? It could be a correlation, not causation. And I still need more than just that. It matches, but it might just be a coincidence.
we have a pretty clear in-group, out-group dynamic going on here, along the lines of humans and vampires. Piotr even goes as far as to say,
We are Cainite naturalists.
referencing the perceived naturalistic hierarchy that the Sabbat sees between humans and vampires.
Yeah, but for example of what I'm talking about here, also I just realized they made the bars here further apart so you can see his face easier and then shrank the size here. Yeah, neat. But also, one of the ways I'm saying that this is something that looks like a fascist but might not be a fascist, the KKK, for example, or most hate groups like that. Now a lot of them do have fascistic tendencies because they associate together, so they kind of get co-opted and, well, merged, because easy source of one probably fits in the other pretty well. But for the longest time, the KKK predated fascism, and it was bad. But they did a lot of the exact same things that were just highlighted here. So it would be an example of these ideas are just kind of sit under this entire, well, 10 post, the small white 10 post, but then I feel like it correlates, but it doesn't quite have that causation to be it. Unless he brings up something that could completely blow my idea out of the water. I think he's stretching on this one.
If that wasn't
Not
enough,
wrong,
he also
I just
says
think it's
directly
not
that the Sabbat's cause is
We're on a war
intentionally
path,
there.
and our cause? To see you lowly, juicy apes serve your natural purpose.
Also, I love how they did disorient his face even further as he goes into it. Like, they really stretched it out even more than I realized at the time. And he's not even trying to convince him at this point. He's just talking about his own superiority to make himself feel better about it. Which is another thing that could be put in there. A lot of the people who fall into these groups, it's more just general evil shit. How do you make people evil? You give them a cause that can't be completed, so they can never actually succeed, but they can always feel like they can. Because we did it before, we can do it again, even though they didn't actually do it before. You just believe they did. You give them a reason to believe that they are special, the in-group, and a reason to believe that it's not their fault, the out-group. Fascists fall into that, but that entire way of prompting people is... It's naturalism, it's fanaticism, it's I said naturalism, not nationalism, whatever. A lot of that, though, is just simple manipulation. It's how to make people listen to you in the worst way possible. It's not uncommon. In fact, while it does fit in the, well, socially most aware evil side, fascism, it doesn't. It's the square rectangle problem. All of these horrible things fit fascism, but fascism doesn't quite fit everything. It's not wrong, and I think it does match in all the ways he's talking about, but I think it's more expansive where they happen to fit in the square or the rectangle, but they're not the square. Bigger box, smaller box, they fit within the smaller box, but they also fit more than that as well. So it's one, but it couldn't be that as well. I probably should have visual props here when I talk about this stuff. It would make it a lot easier.
Purpose.
and a bunch of other references to politics keep cropping up. Kitton even goes as far as to basically spell it out when he refers to the sects as political parties, and any doubts about this should be quashed when Kitton spells out...
Right, so, as has been made abundantly clear, you are basically vampire supremacists.
Within Chapter 2, the themes of...
And see, that's the thing. This is also why I brought up KKK. Not because I remember that comment, I actually completely forgot about that. But I think it's more a matter of fascism happens to follow a lot of the categories of just being, I'm right, you're wrong, fuck you. Which is, I mean, that was sometimes the preempt for the Crusades. It was for most wars. It was for a lot of other things. I'm right, you're wrong, fuck you. Supremacy is a lot of the time, but also just wanting to be the person who is right. Hell, you can make that argument about most things. Also, the reason I pointed out that the Crusades were only sometimes about that is because a lot of the times it was actually due to internal pressures and trying to relieve it by saying, hey, we're doing something good. Don't, kill me as the Pope. Yeah, that happened more than once. So, yeah. The more you look into the policies and why things happen, it doesn't make it less disturbing. It makes it just way more corrupt. And it's like Game of Thrones, essentially. But, the characters weren't nearly as easily dead. Yeah.
Politics, natural hierarchies, and the relationship between humans and vampires is repeated again and again and again. I counted no fewer than 3 explicitly political terms, and 8 other times words usually associated with politics were used, including serfdom, censorship, and slavery throughout.
But those are also really old concepts that existed well beforehand, and they're a group that exists well beforehand, even if the members didn't. How to put it? Yeah, I'm going with, this is, even all the concepts he's brought up, yeah, I'm very much solidified in my idea right now. I think Cosmic is off the mark here. He's describing it as, this is fascism, and it's not wrong. It is fascism, but I don't think it's intended as fascism. It looks like fascism because it has all the high marks and, well, low marks. Technically, the word is hallmark, but for some reason I have trouble saying that. I don't know why. But yeah, it feels like a bigger description, and going down to just fascism alone it's fascism plus. It's like Disney Plus, where you go in there and you have no idea what the hell's going on because no one actually buys that. Don't do that. It's all a ripoff. All of them, regardless. Netflix, Disney, Amazon, take your pick. They're all, I should probably stop paying for them now that I think about it. That's on me. But more importantly, yeah, I get where he's going, and he's making a good comparison here. And this is not something is incorrect. It's more that it's an interpretation, but I think it doesn't quite match up. Mostly because we don't really know about their actual hierarchy. We just know that the strongest and highest rated person there, who wasn't their leader, Kevin, didn't know that much about what they're actually doing. So that might be a ground level one for all we know.
I was limiting myself to terms that were near exclusively politically charged. If I opened up the qualifying words to include things like the word supremacy, it might have been more akin to 20. Most of that scene really is political exposition on how...
Oh, yeah, no, it completely was political. I just think they're highlighting themselves as, we're the bad guy faction. Accurately, too. They are the bad guy faction. At least that's how they're usually portrayed. I'm sure there's probably some good ones, but that's kind of like how in JoJo they could have a good Nazi. They had to work to earn that one.
The vampire underworld operates. And this is a series which is extremely careful and precise about the words that it uses by dropping hints through using specific terminology or letting the lack of wording speak just as much as the spoken lines. An entire audio log is dedicated to this concept. All of this suggests to me that the constant references to politics and philosophy are very much intentional and not just, funny political science joke. Although,
I mean, they are funny political science jokes. And I stand by my topic. Those guys are scary. But I don't think it's so much that you're showing fascism, but that you're showing that something is fascistic in its tendencies. It's not that they're aiming for one thing, it's that it just happens to fall under the category. It's like when you do the entire spectrum of liberal to fascist, order versus chaotic. Yeah, I'm pulling up D&D terms here, but it's kind of accurate. There's an entire spectrum of where things fall. This one just happens to be under it. I don't think it's aiming for that specific label. So I really think my disagreement here isn't so much that he's right or that he's wrong. I think he's accurately describing things, but he's attributing it to intentionally describing the phrase he's using, where I'm thinking it happens to also fit as the phrase he's using. I think what we have here is called a nerd argument. I engage in this frequently, usually not on camera though, but I love this kind of stuff.
Although it was also a funny political science joke, which is one of the strengths of this team's writing ability while we're on the subject. They're very good at mixing in thematic through lines and important information with more comedic lines.
Yep.
Based on all of this and everything else that we know about them, I think it's pretty safe to call the Sabbat a fascist sect.
Yeah, but also that could be applied to literally everyone. And this is one of the reasons I don't think it's really just, hey, here's the fascist faction. It's that here is the faction that has this flavor of fascism versus the Camillas, or Camarillas, I cannot speak today, flavor of fascism versus the Tremere, which is part of the Camarilla, but also their own flavor of fascism. Well, granted, they're more feudalism, but at that point, there's a lot of overlap in how they're acting and carrying through, and the more you look into actual terminology like this, the more you realize it's just generalizations that work best when you don't get into the nitty-gritty. Because when you get into the nitty-gritty, people are difficult as fuck, man.
So, back to Kevin. Where does he fit into all of this? Does he believe in the Sabbat's goals and ideals?
No. In fact, he joined for the exact
Really,
wrong
no.
reason.
This is another one of the ironies of Kevin's character. He works alongside the Sabbat, but he doesn't really believe in their cause. During his initial introductions, Kevin talks like he's a full-blown believer in the Sabbat's crusade. He says all the things that they expect their members to say.
But
he refers to himself as a Wizard of Cain, about how he's far more than a mere mortal, how he despises the Masquerade, and how good all of that feels, but he frequently displays behaviors and attitudes that are fundamentally incompatible with the Sabbat's worldview. For example,
yep. And then we find it out in his diatribe we heard earlier, where it's not that he believes it, it's that he believes he has no choice but to believe it to escape, giving in to the beast. The rest is just how you get to that point, but he's still too human to actually really follow through, and he hates that. It's that depression that was his initial characterization, or at least how I viewed him.
he has a cat.
Oh no,
Smurfles.
I'm so deep, Mr. Smurfles.
He
Yeah.
reveals to Dee that he has a number of ties which remain to his human life. He still owns his apartment, he's still on the papers, and he'll even pretend to be alive to make sure that he isn't reported as missing. Dee will often make comments that are based far more on his ideals of what humanity is capable of, rather than the state that it's currently in. Those ramblings are one of the reasons that I adore Dee, in case you were wondering. A recurring joke throughout Arc 1 is about Dee acquiring a new blender for 99p. Within the context of his interrogation of Kevin, he also goes on about disliking vegetables or taxes, but Kevin will argue with him on each aspect of it whenever it comes up, calling him ridiculous, absurd, or insulting Dee by calling him a child. The human is railing against civilization, while the vampire defends it. And while hilarious, it also showcases the cracks in Kevin's facade. Maintaining the illusion that he's still a normal person by pretending to be alive, one could argue is him upholding the Masquerade.
I like this, because that's how I thought it was. At first, it was him upholding the Masquerade, because he's defending the veneer of civilization. But then you realize he's not doing it. It's part of the great reveal that made this entire thing work. And I know I'm gushing about this scene as much as Cosmic is here, and I'm not going to defend myself on this. I am very much doing that. It's so good because it shows you, I'm acting. Here's the act. Ah, ha, ha. Yes, I'm human still because this is the thing we need to do. But then it actually pisses him off and he breaks character. He breaks saying the things about the Camille. He breaks saying things about society and goes down to what we heard earlier about how this is my life. It ended and there's no escape but to go crazy and maybe lose myself in that. And that was why it's so freaking depressing. He tried and he failed and he tried and he failed, and now he's trying so he can fail and just stay down.
Or at the very least, it's him trying to keep his comrades out of trouble. But it should make no difference to Kevin how human society operates outside of that. He's part of the Sabbat. They don't care about how human civilization is now, they seek to replace it with their own version. All of these combined are completely at odds with Sabbat philosophy. Kevin even mentions that it's likely his packmates would eat him if they knew, like, a tenth of this. And it's worth noting, this is all before he ever meets Dee. He was doing this long before he encountered the family of hunters. He didn't need to be convinced to do any of this, meaning that this lack of true belief was the case long before he encountered the hunters. So that raises the question of what he was even doing with the Sabbat in the first place.
Depression.
It's obvious he doesn't really believe in their cause, so why was
He
he
wanted the
with them
blood
at all?
bond that would break
In a
Tremere's
word,
hold.
Desperation.
How will you know this?
Hopelessness is another reoccurring theme throughout
Yep.
World of Darkness. The powers that be are so powerful that there aren't even enough words in any language that has, does, or ever will exist that can properly convey it.
Unless you're a mage, in which case, shit be broken.
But they do have limits. It is, in theory, possible to overcome them. Yet, even if those powers were defeated, for a lot of people in these settings, nothing would change. Even if the vampire clans, their leaders, and the antediluvians were all burned away, the vampires would still be vampires. It wouldn't free them from their burdens. The odds are ever stacked against anyone in this world in like 6 different ways, from their loss of the connections and social structures they had before, to the conflicts within their own groups and with other groups, to their low chances of survival in the first place, and their constantly at-risk humanity. The odds are constantly stacked against most people. Even though there are ways to improve things for them in a genuinely meaningful way, very few of them know about any of these. Hopelessness is a very easy thing to let seep in, and for Kevin, it is particularly pronounced.
We saw him basically
But
at the
similar
bottom
to
of it.
D, that sense of hopelessness in the world is part of what makes Kevin work so well. I think to understand the sheer degree of his desperation, it would be a good idea to go through his history again. And this time when we hit an organization, let's remind ourselves of what we know about each of them. We know that Kevin was originally part of the Camarilla by virtue of being embraced into the clan Tremere. He was brought into the fold specifically because he worked as an accountant.
Because they
His
needed an
understanding
accountant,
of numbers, resources, and the requirements needed for maintaining the masquerade was seen as an incredibly valuable set of tools. for
Not
their
wrong,
cause.
but also
At
wrong
first,
place to do it.
There's actually an interesting bit of foreshadowing in Chapter 1 where, throughout the early part of the chapter, we learn that the family are on the trail of a bunch of missing persons reports local to the area. When they find the vampires, Kevin berates another member of the pack, saying that his overfeeding had lured the hunters to them. This is actually an economic argument, only using a different type of resource. Being an accountant basically boils down to resource management, where to get resources, where they need to go, and the most effective use of them. The vampire
Stop making accountants sound rational, man. That is not normal. Accountants are something that should be feared and dreaded. Don't make them sound like it's an optional choice. It is a curse that you must run away from.
Humanity is a food source and therefore a resource. If too many people go missing in one area in a short amount of time, eventually someone who knows about vampires will notice. And eventually, one of them will come to the conclusion that a pack of vampires is involved and come and deal with it. On a long enough time frame, this is pretty much a guarantee. Kevin's advice
Art style
was to
changes, man.
not do this, which is promptly ignored.
No such thing as overfeeding.
And the family found the tunnel, so his assessment was obviously correct.
Damn.
This actually reflects Kevin's issues with the Camarilla. He gives advice to the region that mind controlling or blood bonding their subjects only works so long as they have the necessary resources, at which point they either starve to death or someone runs the numbers and finds out that theirs don't make any sense.
Everything must add up or you will be subtracted from the equation.
In both
Did that just say the most glorious accountant line? The world's most glorious accountant line. No, I refuse on principle to say there's a glorious accountant. This phrase does not work. This sentence does not work. It has a blank void on the screen. It should be blurred out.
In both situations, despite being evidently correct, he is completely ignored. No wonder he's frustrated. Kevin
Like I said, the everyman.
also mentions how the clan Tremere aren't trusted within the Camarilla broadly. Long story short, there is the House of Tremere started as mages who willingly turned to vampirism in an attempt to gain immortality while maintaining their magic. It didn't go too well. As a result, not a lot
Oh yeah, that's why the entire not going well part. Also, with all the shit mages can do, I'm surprised that's the way they decide. Someone probably had to try it eventually though.
of vampires are sure what to make of them. So he's stuck
Weird.
in a situation where he's been essentially abandoned because he was good at the job he was embraced to do in the first place, and stuck in a clan which no one outside of wants anything to do with. And on top of that, he's still suffering from the blood bond. The Camarilla is a society that refuses to change or adapt to the needs of its people. It's a society that is stagnating for essentially no good reason other than the people at the top have decided that they like the status quo exactly as it is.
I mean, that's basically normal society. The people at the top like where they're at, and change could threaten that. It's also why change is usually based on things going over time, because people just die of old age. We don't stagnate because we can't live forever. when you have a society where the people with the most power, in this case literal but also political, have all the power, it never changes because the people at the top don't think it needs to. And you don't have anyone rising up from the bottom because the person at the top wouldn't like it. It's one of those interesting dynamics that would actually be really fascinating if someone did a deep dive onto a fictional immortal society and how that would probably be a really terrible place. There's a lot of various fiction media that does cover that, but never really a deep dive onto just the socioeconomic level, which is probably because, having said that out loud, that sounds incredibly nerdy and boring, which, I mean, I would like it, but that's probably as much damnation as anything else that idea would possibly have.
Because they're too old to understand how the new era works, willful ignorance, a lack of flexibility, comfort with their positions of power, a belief that no one can challenge them, or some combination of all.
The last two. It's the last two. Because the first few they mentioned, would it be if you need it? The last two is we're comfortable and we don't need to change, and the rest just follows through.
Of these factors. When you have a society like that,
It happens in everything.
Refuses to
Kind of just
change how it
drags
operates
on.
because that's just the way it's always been, or because it benefits those at the top, you get people who will adopt far more radical outlooks on things. Why wouldn't they? They're not being given any other choice. There's a quote that I like that sums up this situation perfectly, by John F. Kennedy of all people. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. Within the world of darkness, this very frustration and inability to allow for a peaceful change is how the Sabbat and the Anarchs first came into being.
Admittedly, well, that might be how they came into being. Their entire idea is self-defeating because it's a bunch of people who want change, who don't get change, who want to go back to a previous thing that doesn't have change. It does really dovetail well with a lot of people who are just trying to get, say, hey, you're a disaffected youth? Join us, we'll help you, followed by, hey, also carry this pointy hat. I know what I said.
So again, Kevin was more or less thrown aside by his sire and regent. He's been removed from any support structures that he may have had in the human world, and because he did his job well but his masters didn't like the answers he gave, he was removed from any support structures he may have had within his clan. And because his clan is distrusted, he didn't have any real support structures within the Camarilla either. And all of this is on top of the fact that he's still blood bonded, but he also says he was encouraged to deepen it. Blood bonding works in 3 stages. The first time they develop strong feelings towards their regent, the second time they become a deeply important person to the thrall, and the third, they are completely under the spell of their regent. And it's also worth noting, abandoned vampires are the absolute dredges of vampiric society. They are not treated well, and anyone can do basically anything to them without consequence. He's basically being forced to choose between being abandoned by his clan or to become more of a committed slave, while still being self-aware enough that he understands the choice he's being offered.
There's a joke in here about that being the average way to work in corporate America, or just the corporate environment at all. But that would be way too on the nose and accurate, so I'm not going to make that joke.
Kevin is completely on his own, entirely isolated, abandoned with next to no alternatives left. Enter the Sabbat, who offer him a way out. An alternative of any sort. The Voldery offered him a way.
I just realized that this is literally a reverse of the previous symbol, but more spiky. Yeah, just turned it around, made it a little spikier. It's very much similar to that and reminiscent.
For him a way out. An alternative of any sort. The Voldery offered him a way to break the blood bond and free himself of his clan's
Voldery.
influence.
I don't remember
And
that name.
presumably they offer him all the things that Pyotr offered the Hunters. Supremacy and a new family. In Kevin's mind, what else can he even do here? He did everything he was supposed to do, and he did it well. He was good at it, but he got nothing for it and was threatened with far worse outcomes unless he just accepted it and obeyed. So Kevin joined the Sabbat out of utter frustration, abandonment, and above all, desperation. Of course he did. This is perhaps the one difference between the Sabbat and real-world fascism. The Sabbat actually did help Kevin break free from the Tremere Pyramid. In reality, fascism doesn't help anyone.
That makes you into an asshole.
Yep.
Hello, Emperor, from If the Emperor Had a Text-to-Speech Device.
It's like they're related or some reason. Why would that be brought up? Is this like, would someone say that Hunter the Parenting is a spiritual successor to If the Emperor Had a Text-to-Speech Device? Nah, that couldn't be the case.
The series which predated Hunter the Parenting. Nice to see you. I was kind of hoping that we could go one analysis without having to refer back to you, since I feel that constantly referring HTP to TTS does HTP a massive disservice due to the implied absolute refusal to see HTP as its own unique series distinct from you.
Yep.
But
still some random thoughts that maybe eventually that show will come back. Let me have them, my delusion. I know it's wrong, but I just want to keep it for a bit.
Goddamn if your line here wasn't perfect. Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent there and I went a little bit lightheaded, but lost my train of thought. Something Etero Dominatus.
I was telling you my pyramid story, remember?
Right, Kevin is a member of the Sabbat.
Tail-weaving recommences.
As we've established, Kevin doesn't really affiliate with the Sabbat all that much.
Yoink.
And having heard all the ways that Kevin was treated while he was with the Camarilla, and the many ways in which he still has ties to his human life, he calls Kevin on the main reason he even stays with them.
Let me ask you a serious question.
He's just kind of going with the flow at this point.
Did you join the Sabbat to experience liberation, freedom, vampiric supremacy?
2 of 3.
Or did you join because you felt it was your only way out?
Admittedly, those first 2 are the only way out for him. The supremacy is like, I don't care about that. Just get me out of this. I don't think he likes vampires all that much. Or people.
Kevin isn't with the Sabbat because he aligns with their goals. In fact, he doesn't truly align with a single one of the Sabbat's principles. If anything, Kevin seems more like he would share beliefs with the Anarchs. But they didn't have the Voldery, so they couldn't free him, and also the Anarchs are a squabbling mess.
Yeah.
He's only with the Sabbat because he doesn't think he has any alternative. He can't live as a human, he isn't welcome in the Camarilla, and he isn't liked within his clan. Kevin is in a lot of ways a victim in all of this. He didn't choose to be embraced, he doesn't like living as a vampire, and his only hope for salvation is the side of a bunch of people he doesn't even share an ideology with. And any attempt to find an alternative is thwarted by the fact that for reasons completely beyond his control, vampiric society doesn't trust his clan. He's a victim of both vampirism and of the society that vampires have made, with their own clan prejudices and power structures. And he seems to know that too. It's no wonder that he came to believe that his only real hope of attaining freedom is to go along with the Sabbat, to embrace the beast and just hope that maybe he'll get something even akin to what he sought after in his human life. But he wouldn't. In an abstract sense, if he acted more and more like a monster like Piotr did, it would spell his end at the hand of the Hunters, or in the conflict with the Camarilla. If he took this to its literal conclusion, another aspect of vampire lore is that when a vampire embraces the beast, as it were, they undergo something called a wosil, a final frenzy where they become a wight, which is the beast within themselves.
Oh, see, this is actually something that might have been mentioned, but I don't remember anything about this, so this is all new information to me. I'm certain someone has talked to me about this in the previous videos or on Discord where they go into a lot of detail, but also people who know about World of Darkness know a lot about World of Darkness, so a lot of the information goes over my head. It's interesting, it's fascinating, but also, I ain't that bright.
Their minds are permanently handed over to their instincts. They, themselves, are lost and can't be retrieved again. They're too far gone. At that point, the only thing that you can do is put them out of their misery. The only shot at freeing Kevin would be if the Sabbat won, but as we see in Chapter 2, they'll turn on one another eventually.
Yep.
Of course they will. Their entire ideology boils down to social Darwinism, who can come out on top. Kevin even mentions that it's likely that without the Voldery, it's likely packs would tear each other to shreds. Going down this route would only hurt or even end Kevin. In the same way that authoritarians promise freedom for those it deigns as its in-group, so long as they surrender their liberty, their freedom, and their minds to the state. In the end, it only ends up harming and destroying those who adhere to it, either because of outside influences, or because without an external threat, they turn on one another. Dee put it best. Freedom never comes through surrender. It comes...
Again, I'm going to just reiterate that I don't believe Cosmic's wrong on this one. I think he's stretching the point. It's fascism adjacent is what it sounds like. Just because I think this is more not so much trying to show what a fascistic vampire looks like, but a vampire that happens to be on the scale that would fit under fascism. Because it doesn't quite match up, but also nothing ever really does. I could go on a massive rant. Again, about how there's various ways to interpret these kind of political definitions. The most accurate way is probably on the shifting scales of where you fit on a spectrum. And not even a side-to-side version, but like a full-on 3D, multiple aspects. The more complex and annoying it gets to the point of being useless, the more accurate it is. But then they're complex and annoying to the point of uselessness, so it gets very disturbing. And you need a 3D model to really understand it, which is fascinating, but also is a level of nerdy that most people just do not want to engage with. Yeah.
comes from rejecting both the Camarilla, a stagnant society that abandoned him, and the Sabbat, a bunch of tiki torch-bearing sociopaths
Accurate.
for a solution that doesn't even solve anything, and finding a new path, to be something other than the monster that Kevin has convinced himself he has to become. Kevin and Dee's conversation is a great back and forth, but one of the more interesting things about it is when you look at it through a more socio-political lens, their talk essentially boils down to Dee doing his best to de-radicalize Kevin, to give him an out, to say to him that he isn't too far gone yet, that he can still change course, to give him something else that he can fight for. Something that Dee understands about doing that is that you can't force someone to change their beliefs.
And this is probably one of the things that initial moment, right at the beginning, if I can pull up the moment. Here. You see you can't really see it on the screen because this would be right outside of it, damn it. My screen's bigger than the one I'm showing. But there's that moment where they go into the home for the very slow, sad episode where they watch the old lady talk about how she was turned, she was embraced, and in the rage and frenzy of being turned, killed everyone and hated herself and was waiting to die. And Dee just accompanied her. And you see that he's willing to engage. He understands what's going on. He's letting people make their choices, but he also knew that for her, it was more or less she was ready to die and then something worse happened. And now here for Kevin's the exact opposite, where he's seeing someone who's ready to die and they're waiting for something worse to happen, but he's giving them away because they still believe and want that way, where for the other person, they were at their end and they were looking forward to that part more than anything else.
All you can really do at the end of the day is try to put them in the right environment, give them the tools, the information, the argument, and the opportunity so that they change their minds on their own. It doesn't always work. There are many times where it doesn't, where your only option left is to fight against the threat. But you can and should try to make every effort to save people from those self-destructive mindsets. But sometimes the harsh reality is that you can't. Dee knows that too. That's what he expected to happen at the end of the probing of Kevin.
Which is why this
Kevin
was such
didn't
a
go down
shocking
that
episode
path.
that it worked.
Even after Dee has told him about his plans on confronting the first vampire, a literally immortal, unkillable beast, or at least wiping out the third generation,
Probably
Kevin
more
still
helpful.
takes him up on the offer.
And sadly
Kevin
more
is
likely.
fully aware that Dee is charging headfirst into an absurd goal, but he still opts to join him. This may well have been the first real choice that Kevin made since he became a vampire. He didn't choose to become one, he didn't choose his clan, he didn't choose his sect, and his reasons for joining the Sabbat were because he didn't have any alternatives. But here, he made a choice, a real one, and that choice was to reject the hand that he had been dealt. One of my favourite visual cues of this audio log as well. Throughout the entire thing, Kevin has been in the shadows of cell bars in his interrogation room.
Oh?
And after Dee's
Oh,
speech,
you're right, and he
those
opened
shadows
it.
are no longer on him. Dee opens the door. He's convinced Kevin. He's no longer a prisoner of his own mind or circumstances. He's been pulled into the metaphorical light. Dee is an optimist, and I think deep down, Kevin is too. He never gave up on his dreams, he kept working hard, he kept trying to make something of his life, and when offered the chance to join Dee to do something better than wasting away into a stew of beastdom that is his curse, he takes it. In this perspective of mine, Kevin is someone who fell into a self-destructive fascist movement, not because he was motivated purely by anger or bitterness or hatred, although he certainly felt all of those things, but his main reason was because he was frustrated with the wider world, abandoned by those at its head, and because those who control the mechanisms that could see it change have no desire to see that change.
It's not an inaccurate way to describe this, and it's my usual criticism of this. I think he's stretching on this one, but I think it's not a incorrect stretch. It's just missing the mark. It's like if we were playing darts, there's the bullseye, and then he's maybe at the +10 on the side. I don't play darts. I have no idea what actually is on the side of that, so I'm probably wrong about that. I think it's close to accurate, but close isn't accurate. It's fine. What we're looking at here is less he's fallen into a fascistic movement and more he's fallen into desperation for people who offered him an out, which the big distinction here isn't that fascistic movements don't do that. They do. All of them do that, but it's not limited to that. And that's, I think, the biggest thing I have a disagreement with here on Cosmic. He's acting as if this is the only way this happens, where what's happening with Kevin is going back to me calling him an everyman. This could happen in many ways to an everyman because you fall into a bad crowd because they offer you something you want, and then other shit happens. It's the various ideas of a deal with the devil. It's trying to escape your situation through insert random escape here that doesn't work because it doesn't make things better. This is normal, and it's an easy way to manipulate people by giving them exactly what they want so they do something that they wouldn't normally and damn themselves for it. It does work with fascism, but it works with a lot more than just fascism. So I think Cosmic, while he's having an accurate representation of this, I think he's more identifying all of the symptoms that also happen to match fascism, but are treated way more generalistically so that it's more, they also match this rather than this is what it is. Correlation over causation, essentially. Not wrong, but not completely right. I think he's right adjacent.
He was stuck with no real options other than giving up what little freedom he had left or being abandoned completely in a world he knew little about. He felt he had no choice if he wanted to see something change, to even have a shot at living the life he wanted to. But then he was given the option of something else, something better, and went for it. Kevin fell into all of this, sure, but now, given the chance, he's doing his best to work towards something better. Because underneath all of that, he isn't an evil man. Within Kevin, a human
Smurple's the
heart
cat.
still beats. And with that, I
Metaphorically.
think we can start to wrap this up. Would you believe me if I said that when I first started making this, I was struggling to come up with things to say?
Yeah. Also, he made posts about this saying like, yeah, it'll be a short one. Maybe like 10, 15 minutes. 10, 15 minutes. 10, 15 minutes. Yeah.
Look at us now, huh? Kevin is a complex character.
I
in a
love
lot of
this, though.
ways.
I like these
He's
deep
a funny
dives.
vampire
This is why I
wizard,
wanted
but
to
he's
do
also
this.
a deeply sympathetic person. Alpha Abuser and Ogre Poppenong broadly are so good at what they do because even when they're making the ha-ha funnies, they're never sacrificing storytelling or theme or character.
Yep.
They incorporate it into what they're doing. Kevin is probably their best incarnation of this method. Hilarious on his own, but his existence says something deeper and is contrasted with the rest of the cast. But
I mean, admittedly, I like Big D a little more than Kevin. Kevin is awesome. Not going to say anything against that. I just like the mysterious nature that we're trying to unravel him as a puzzle on top of his own hilariousness. But that's just because I like puzzle characters more. That personal opinion. I completely understand why he likes Kevin, though. I'm not saying anything's wrong about that. I just, personal choice here.
But if I had to pick my absolute favorite thing about Kevin, he's an example of positive change. I've repeated this point so many times that I feel like a broken record, but I don't think it's possible to overstate it enough. World of Darkness is brutal. Between the worm, the vampires, demons and angels, the technocratic union and everything else, it truly is a world of darkness, both in how grim the world is, and dark in the sense that there seems like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And yet, Kevin is still standing, and he's proof that there is light at the end of the tunnel. Or at the very least, that the fight to reach the end of the tunnel is a fight worth having. Whatever the Sabbat are, they are far from a good group by any stretch of the imagination.
Accurate.
But nor is the Camarilla, or much of vampiric society. Sometimes the only good option is to find something new. But whatever the case is, what is undeniable is that Kevin was a man who came close to the edge of genuine despair. Things got
Close? No, dude, I think he was well at genuine despair. He was despairing. I'm going to disagree with him on this one. This is a man who was very much locked, and the visual aesthetic right here is accurate, chained and locked up behind bars with all of the shit done to him. No, I don't think he was close to the edge of despair. He was in despair, but he was still trying to figure it out, but he was very much in there. He was like, okay, how do I make this work? I don't. Shit.
genuinely bad for him, and he was on the urge of going down a path of no return. In a world like the World of Darkness, trying to maintain one's humanity or sense of optimism can feel daunting. It can be depressing, it can leave you feel like an idiot for even trying. It can be so easy to fall into that darkness. But no one has to be the monster that they've convinced themselves that they are. The world can be dark, but it can still change. But even if it couldn't, you can. You don't have to give up on yourself. Sometimes you can just find something that works for you. And maybe that's enough. You can fall into the absolute depths, but it's never too late to pull yourself out from it. Freedom, hope, and optimism still exist no matter how bleak things get. So long as you choose to, you can claw your way out from the darkness and find a new path. You need only rise and take it. And that is why I adore him. Because
Hold
he
up the
did.
line. He's
He's a beacon of what never giving up looks like in this world of darkness. He is truly the great and mighty Kevin. I always suck at how to
Joking aside, I do like how he's basically a good example of what a vampire playthrough was told to me. It's something where you're in there and you're trying to get more powerful because RPG, but also maintain your humanity, and that's the struggle here. And Kevin's very much sampling what a person playing this game would look like from the outside. Trying their best, failing, but also trying and seeing if they can make it work to maintain not being a monster.
end these things. Oh, thank God, sweet release.
And that was QosmicVoid's deep dive into Kevin. And frankly, I love this. I don't agree with all of the points he brought up. I think some of them were missing the mark, but they were close enough that they could pull out some very interesting details that did show how things were interpreted, how they were working. And while the conclusion might not be there, I think his work getting to it was accurate. And I love seeing this. I love seeing this dive. I like getting into literature. I like getting into fiction and stories and characterizations and trying to work through how the authors and everyone is just doing this. It's like all the good points of being in college minus the $70,000 that you had at the end of it. Oh God, that's all. But still, this is fun, man. Cosmic, thank you for making this. I hope you do other characters. I would love to see a deep dive on Kitten, but frankly, you probably need more information on him because he's still kind of mysterious. We know a little about him, but not enough. I want to see you go into Marcus. I want to see you go into Door, but unless you can interview Bruva Alsabusa or anyone from his crew like Speaker D, it would be really hard. On the other hand, if someone could bother anyone in Bruva Alphabusa, I cannot speak today, Bruva Alphabusa's crew about interviews with QosmicVoid about this, that would be awesome because I like how this works. I would love to see him just pull aside all their little thoughts and processes on this because this is fun. Seriously, someone get on that. I would do it, but also I'm lazy and I will forget within 5 minutes because squirrel brain. Yeah, I'm aware. Either way, if you haven't already, there's a link below to the original video. I thought I'd be breaking this up into 2 parts, but frankly, no. I love this. It was great. I feel my throat going because I haven't recorded this long in a while, but fuck it. I don't care. This is awesome. I don't regret a bit of this. Minus the throat hurting. That was probably a mistake. I should have brought something to drink while doing this. Oh, well, that's on me. Either way, again, link, hit it up. I'll see you guys in the next one. When he makes something about Kitten, maybe. Or check out his other videos because he's done a lot of deep dives and I probably want to check those out. Either way, see you guys then. Adios.